We are back at it on the SuccessFlow podcast, both of us in attendance. And if you listened to last week, like most of you devoted listeners do, you know I went solo and kind of threw a teaser out there on why I was solo. And today we are getting in to the details on that. And
It's good to be
Bamboo
back.
Banger, I'm glad to have you back. I'm glad to have you back. It was lonely. It was lonely recording.
You did great. The episode was awesome, man. It was a really good, you have a lot to give and a lot of people can learn really cool things about you and how you operate. And I think the deep work and the habit of ferocity, that was an awesome episode. So any listeners out there, if you haven't heard it yet, go back to last week and check it out. You did awesome.
Yeah, ripping the solos are different, right? There's a little more. Yeah, it's lonely. The back and forth isn't there, but when we have to do it, we both have a lot to share. So, without keeping the listeners on the edge of their seat any longer, the Bamboo Banger for this episode, given what occurred, is leaning into the unknown and how you handle that. And we talk about it not being a linear path on to whatever success is to yourself. And especially with entrepreneurship, sales, whatever you're doing, life is not a set path and playbook. And you experience that firsthand. So when we talk about diving into the unknown, let's jump in head first to this episode and give us a rundown on why you need to take a little bit of rest the last couple of weeks.
Nice one with the diving headfirst into the unexpected. Yeah, dude, the last week has just been absolutely insane. Happy to report I'm feeling much more back to normal, but I was down for the count for a week, man. I was playing basketball like I normally do on Saturday mornings. And the way it's set up, I don't know if I actually explain. It's hard to explain to people. And so like the way the gym is set up, it's like full court, side court, right? So we're playing side court, and along the whole gym is, is a wall, and there's chairs all sitting along that wall. Well, it's like set back a little bit. And then if you take your hand like on the wall and go up about 8 feet, there's like a ceiling about 1.5 feet soffit that comes out, that's brick. And then it goes all the way back up to the top of the ceiling of the gym, right? So you're envisioning like, okay, I got this brick, massive wall at the top here. It comes down, and then about 8 feet above the floor, it goes in about 1.5 feet. And then the other wall where the chairs are lined up is underneath, right? So I'm on a full speed fast break. I'm playing hard. I'm like, I'm playing with guys who are a decade younger than me. So I'm one of the hustle guys. I try to make sure people still know that I got it a little bit on the court. So I'm on a fast break, full speed. Ball comes up, lobs up over to me. It hits my fingertips just barely out of my reach, and it bounces inbounds, going out of bounds. So I'm still picking up speed to go save this loose ball. My momentum carries me so fast out of bounds, and I'm about to crash into these chairs. And so my initial thought was, I'm just going to jump up on a chair, push my hands out to brace myself against the wall, not taking into account what was above me, which is the edge of that brick soffit, and literally just took a header right in the edge of that thing, man. And it was unbelievable. The whole gym I could hear it go, oh, like it was just such a fluke thing. Not a normal basketball injury, but I had it playing basketball. And I remember
no kidding.
I remember just putting my hands immediately on top of my head and being like, oh shit, I need a hospital. Like it was just an impact. I knew immediately I had done some damage. And so I put my hands on my head, and I'm feeling like I could feel like what I thought was like a goose egg, but it wasn't a goose. It was like literally basically scalped
I'm cringing
myself.
right now because I saw the photograph, and it was one of the most jarring photographs, which they're always more jarring when it's someone that you care about. And I've just got it it is burned into my head. I think we might be in the sensitive content arena if we share it on YouTube with this episode.
Yeah, we'll spare the photos.
It was gnarly.
It was brutal. Never had an injury like that in my life. And it was immediate reaction. I sit down, I move my hands away, and there's blood all over my hand. And then it's just like literally my head spilling out on the floor. And thankfully, it was the gash was big enough, and it was hard enough, it went all the way down to my skull. Like you could see it, and it was just insane. But what was really cool about the guys that I play with and whatnot, like a few of them ran right over and we got some shirts and towels and just applied pressure immediately. and stop the bleeding. And I never lost consciousness. And so one of the guys was talking to me. He must, I don't know exactly, what his occupation is. Maybe he's in the medical field or something, but he was talking to me, trying to keep me awake and asking me questions like, hey, do you know where you're at? What are you doing later today? Or what were your plans? Do you have kids? And like, just talking to me, keep me, keep me coherent and going. And I was like, we need to call 911. I need a hospital, call an ambulance, whatever. And a few minutes later, I was still awake and talking and whatnot. So one of the guys was like, hey man, like St. Joe's is right around the corner. I can drive your truck to the hospital. Not a problem. We'll save you a few $1,000 from an ambulance. Like, do you think you could walk out of here? And I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So I called Kim, my wife, and was like, Kim, I'm bleeding from the head and you got to come. And so long story short, made it to the hospital, and 17 staples later, they closed up the gash, and it was pretty gnarly. I never had an injury like that. It wasn't stitches, just crank staples all the way through. The good news is no fractures, no hemorrhaging of the brain or anything like that. They did the CT scan. Everything came back clear, which I was really concerned about. My neck is still actually sore to this day. It feels like it was in a car accident, which quite frankly, it was probably very similar to a car accident. And but all of that came back clear, and basically was concussed for an entire week. And have you ever had a concussion?
I've had two. I've had two in my life when I was younger too, which kind of looking at the brain, it's been interesting kind of evaluating, because I was definitely like mid-puberty for both. And so your brain's still developing, it's not done developing till you're 25-ish. But not a fun experience. I remember football practice, I got one, and coming to looking up at a raindrop, like seeing the raindrop come directly to my eye. Had to ride back with coach, and my mom was calling my uncle, who's had a couple concussions, stating like, don't let him fall asleep. And like, that was the biggest thing. And all I wanted to do was go to sleep. Was yours kind of similar experience? Or?
Well, what's interesting now is they want you to sleep. So it's almost like, when you have a kid, they say, don't put the baby on his belly. And then but then your mom's like, well, that's how we used to put you to sleep. And then they change it. And then it's like, okay, now you put the baby on your side, and then now put the baby on your back. And like, they change it every 10 years when they find out new
There's
information.
no right information. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't know what's right. But now with a concussion, I guess they want you to sleep. It helps the brain heal, and it kind of shuts things down, which is interesting. So anyway, there was no restrictions there.
I think it was just immediately, like right after, I think was the biggest thing. Like, anyway.
Yeah. So that was my first one. And it was literally Monday through about Saturday morning. It's crazy, man. Like like the dizziness and the lightheadedness, it wasn't constant, but it would come on at just random times where like you think the weirdest thing about it is you're not sick. I never got nauseous from it, and you're not hurt. Like you don't feel pain, and you don't feel sick. So you feel like you're capable. And so like you'll go downstairs and even just standing in the kitchen making dinner for my kids for 25 minutes, all of a sudden I'm like, damn, I feel like I'm on a freaking boat, and I need to go lie down right now. Like I can't even, like I got to hold myself up. And that was really kind of scary for all of us. I mean, myself and family, and no one really knew what was going to happen, and, kind of what the outcome of this thing was going to be. And so very, very grateful that it wasn't worse, because it definitely could have been a lot worse. But we did the follow-up CT scan about 4 or 5 days later, and that all came back clear. So it's just a matter of now on the road of recovery to picking up my activity and what that progression looks like, because I definitely won't be able to play basketball for a few months, which kind of sucks because I was in like a nice routine and, lifting heavy weights and things that I was in such a good groove, and I got to just take it slow. And, the wake up call for me and realizing that was just a few days ago. I went on a 20-minute walk with my son and the dog, and that was my max. Like I started getting lightheaded after 20 minutes, and it was just a walk. I'm like, damn. But saw the neurologist, and they're like, this is typical. This is normal. You just got to follow, you just got to test your limits a little bit, and then just shut it down when you hit them, and it'll get better. And it takes 14 to 21 days, they say. So just got to be patient. But it was wild, gnarly situation.
Are you going to be the first basketball player to begin playing in a helmet now?
Yeah, exactly. They're going to put the Guardian helmet on me.
Listen, it's not too soon. We're already having some fun with this, as you can see with the diving in head first. But in all sincerity, we were pretty freaked out when, in the group text that we're in, when we saw that, because you're thinking pick up basketball, and I would imagine like these are instincts, right? It's a game that you played. This is the sport that you're most capable and the closest to mastery. And you've gone through for how many breakaway free balls in your life, and it just kind of kicked in and you went. Never in that environment, right? So you're not thinking about looking for a wall. It's just a freak thing.
Totally.
Yeah, this stuff can happen, across life. So I wanted to talk about, you've been really open, especially with the jump, and you've shared about your journey and looking at health and, how we are not spring chickens anymore. And we're trying to age well on this path to success, taking care of the body. What was it like going down those kind of thoughts? Because I know what can be creeping in there. Is this the new normal? How am I going to change, et cetera? What was that kind of like? And how are you navigating through it? I know you're pretty much out now, but talk about a little bit that inner conversation.
Yeah. So the hardest thing about that whole thing is the unknown, right? And that's the topic of this podcast, is you don't know necessarily which direction this is going to go. The one thing I will say is absolutely grateful for the relationships that I have. This sort of situation shows you the people that, care about you and love you the most. Everyone that's reached out has just been super awesome to hear from, and, definitely didn't let everyone on kind of the severity of it. Just letting people know I was okay and just working through things. I'm not, and it's hard for me to have people reaching out to me and wondering how I'm doing. Like, I don't, it's hard for me to be okay with that. I'm usually the one checking up on people, and I'm always fine.
You're a protector.
So that was a change. But yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of anxiety, and there was a little bit of like, maybe some panicking at certain points last week of just like, oh my God, like I'm feeling away, and like, is this going to pass? Is this just kind of me panicking? I just got to let this pass, or, taking some deep breaths. And quite honestly, man, I said a few prayers. It's just kind of like, come on, Lord, like give me the strength right now. And I'll tell you what I said in those prayers was, I've been working my ass off for the last 2 years, and this is what you're prepared for. I just need the strength to get through it. I've worked my body in the last 2 years to get it right, to get my body right, to build it up, to be strong for a situation like this. And I just needed your strength to get me through a little bit. But I had I been, a few years ago, and maybe that unhealthy guy that you were just kind of alluding to, maybe I wouldn't have been able to recover as quickly, or, who knows. But I think that the work that I put into my health, and the focus on fitness and focus on, building the asset to be as strong as possible, prepared me for a situation like this to allow my body to heal at its peak ability.
I love that. I love seeing you go reach out to a higher power, whatever that might be. That also, in my opinion, is the way to help the healing process. Whatever energy is driving our cells to reproduce, and this amazing meat suit that we wear that repairs itself, the more you can kind of lean into that and say, I'm here to heal. I want to heal, and lean into that. I think there's absolutely something too that I can't prove with science, but I love to hear that you were going kind of that direction for guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think the other thing too is just developing the patience, right? Is knowing, hey, I'm grateful for this situation, that it wasn't worse, but I've got to really be patient. And it's hard because you want to get after it. You want to go all in on things. You want to do it. But this really is a good reminder to take a step back. You're still on the path. You may have had a setback, but just be patient and trust the process, right? So many of us try to succeed at a high level tomorrow, when if we just continue putting in the efforts little by little, you will get to where you need to go. And this was just a really good real life reminder of that in this process of like, hey, I need to take it slow and just continue doing one foot in front of the other. And little by little, I'm getting better and better. And eventually I'll be successful and get out of this thing. And so it just was a unique perspective, real life perspective, like all the things that we're trying to achieve in life. I want the successful business. I want, a bigger house, or I want this car, or I want to be able to set my kids up for college. I want to take care of my family, whatever all that is. Like, you can't do it tomorrow. You have to be patient, and you have to realize that you're building the foundation, and you're continuing to compound, you're continuing your efforts towards the goal that you want, but it's just not going to happen tomorrow. And so it was just a neat perspective. And that was something that I reflected on throughout this whole process of like, okay, now I know I'm going to be okay. Even though I'm feeling away and having certain setbacks and things like that, I just got to know where my limits are and just continue to push those limits to the edge. That way I can get better tomorrow and do more than I was able to do yesterday.
Absolutely. It's interesting timing too, because it's open enrollment season, right? For getting your health benefits and everything squared away for next year. Paul and I were dancing back and forth doing the cost benefit on whether she should join mine, and just talking through. And one of the, oh man, I'm already forgetting what the actual acronym is, but it's accident something and dismemberment. It's like you're going through these things like, oh, I'm not going to need this. I'm not going to need X, Y, Z. And this is just a great example of these freak accidents. That's why insurance exists. This is why people are trying to mitigate and take care of their families, because of like examples just like this. And so it's not just car accidents or whatnot. If you're an active human being, things can happen, but also you can't be dwelling on the fear of them.
Yeah. I mean, life is crazy, man. It's just a reminder that like it comes at you fast. Tomorrow's never guaranteed, and there's no reason to wait on the things that you want. Like now's the time to take action, continue to push forward. Get your health. I actually just had we work with Gardner, Matt Gardner, a friend of the pod, gentle member. We're going to get him on here soon. He's our incredible health broker. And we just had a meeting with him yesterday, and he's like, all right, Evel Knievel, what do we need to do for you? Because I'm like, diving head first into this stuff. And so we were just having a good laugh about it. And I think that's also a good reminder about any of these types of unexpected situations is if you can find the humor in these situations, it does go a long way, albeit it's more difficult said than done. But I know one of the things that I was able to do successfully was just kind of play on it. Like, hey, I got 17 staples on my head, and this was 2 days after Halloween. Like, damn, why didn't this happen the day before Halloween? Could have really went all in on that Frankenstein costume.
Frankenstein basketball player.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of have to find it's an uncontrollable situation. It happened. It is what it is. You're dealing with it. And in order to deal with it, sometimes humor, bringing that in kind of helps you get through those situations too. But yeah, definitely a good reminder that life just comes at you fast, and you're going to have a handful of these pivotal moments, and they shape who you are, and they kind of redirect your thinking of what's most important and where you should be going.
Absolutely. I'll have to verify this with a little Wrangler and see if Kim's on board with it. But chicks dig scars. That is the silver lining of this. Like, get to wear it with pride, right on the top of your dome.
That's right. We're just refreshing the sparks are flying because of this gnarly scar I'm going to have on the top of my head. Although I've got a good full head of hair, so it didn't have to shave it. It didn't I think I'll be able to cover it up pretty well because it's not like right on the forehead. It's a little bit above. But when I'm old and I'm balding and I got, perhaps because of how, the longevity that I'm seeking, my great grandchildren are old enough where I can share stories. I'm not going to tell them that this is how it happened. I fought a lion or something, like they're going to see the scar on the top of my head, and it's going to be some elaborate story of how me and a massive king of the jungle got into a fight
to submission.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the only way to go, but all right, injuries aside, injuries aside, that's definitely something that's unexpected, car accidents, things like that. But, what else can you think of in your world where something's unexpected or, kind of happened out of your control or, kind of staying on theme with the podcast here? Give us some examples of, how you deal with some of those situations. Maybe it's in work or life or whatever.
Yeah, I'm thinking just top of mind now, and we don't dive into politics too deep on the podcast, but you can't argue with the fact that it's the election was very trying on certain people, and this is our country and we have to vote. And whichever side of the fence that you lie on it, there's a lot of unknown right now. And if you are putting too much emotional capital into it, noting that it is important, this is our country, this is due process, but the unknown can wear at you. And I think it's the biggest reminder to come back, and even though it's unknown, or if the election did not play out with your favorite candidate, what you can control is yourself, your actions, and your decisions. And, even with the unknown, you still have the power in your life to make the right decisions to keep you on the path that's best for you, it's best for your family, and keeping you toward the mission that you're trying to execute on. So I think that it's a great reminder, just as we kind of go and close out the year. We're all trying to hit on some of our annual goals, starting the planning for 2025, which each next year approaching is always an unknown. What are you doing that's in your control and taking action? And looking up a quote, and I don't even know who Dennis Waitley is, but life is inherently risky. There's only one big risk you should avoid at all costs, and that's the risk of doing nothing. So back to paralysis, overthinking, letting the unknown induce fear in you to where you're not taking any action at all is what we're trying to avoid. And so some of the tools on the podcast that we talk about, pen to paper, getting quiet, removing the distractions, I think is one way we can, again, take action and dive into the unknown, hopefully without the blood or the staples.
Is that a good segue for the third and final jump workshop experience coming up?
I think it is. I think it's timely.
I think it was very timely. Dude, very well said about the election and whatnot. Control what you can control and just focus on yourself. Put the oxygen mask on first. That's what we're all about. But yeah, we got the jump coming up, the third and final of the year, December 9th. It's a way for people to put pen to paper. You and I will both be there. We've done a couple of these already this year, super successful in the value that people have gotten. And the feedback has just been incredible. And so it's just another way to redefine who you are, where you want to go, and how to get there, and working with like-minded individuals and setting the tone for 2025. So we'll put the link in the show notes, but December 9th, 11:30 to 3 p.m. It's Monday at Kitsune Brewing. Our good friend Tyler Smith is going to host us again. But yeah, I think it's super important. And it's another thing that you kind of learn through these unexpected situations is the more that you can document your life, and whether it's through a journal or just maybe notes on your phone, or maybe it's video, maybe it's this podcast, maybe it's through a newsletter, whatever it is, the more that you can document your life, the more you can learn about yourself and kind of capture those pivotal moments that you have. Because a lot of times you don't realize a moment is pivotal until long after, or you've realized the outcome of that decision. And most of those moments are coming from a decision you had, a relationship you developed, or an experience. And so it's like having the ability to document is super important. I think that if you're running through life and you're not actually writing things down, or you're not actually sharing anything, it doesn't have to be publicly, just sharing it with yourself or sharing it with your spouse or significant other or friends or whatever, having the ability to jot down where you were, the emotions you had, the thought process you had. When you look back on it later in life, you're able to reflect and realize the importance of maybe what that situation was trying to tell you. And those pivotal moments could be good or bad. And it's all about your perspective and how you come out of those things. And am I going to take this experience that was not a great experience? Am I going to allow it to, let negative ways of coping seep in? Or am I going to be grateful for the things that I learned and lessons I learned and how to proceed and be better moving forward? Not necessarily, definitely necessarily stopping myself from taking a header into a brick wall, but I'm going to be grateful for it wasn't worse, right? And I'm going to be grateful, like, hey, someone's looking out for me right now. And what are the things that I can take care of and push forward and make a bigger impact in this world? Because if I wasn't meant to do something, then I could have been taken out right then and there, and I wasn't. So I'm grateful for that. So let's make some things happen. And that's kind of the mindset that I have, as opposed to feeling sorry for myself and coping in negative ways. So these moments come good or bad. It's just the perspective you have going forward is what's important. So when you have those unknowns and those unexpected, it's all about the mindset and the positive mindset, and just knowing that things are going to be okay, and using your resources and leveraging your relationships to keep you at bay and above, the valleys that you might find yourself in.
Love that. You just triggered something that I was listening to a podcast with Tim Ferriss, and he had Derek Sivers on, who's a really interesting guy. He's been popping up all over for me in the podcast circuit that I follow. Entrepreneur, but really a philosophical guy. And he was talking about how he had this predetermination about the Middle East. And he spent the last year trying to figure out which things that he just had a negative context to, and started leaning into them and just learning about. Like, as soon as he had I'm not interested in that, I don't like that, he wanted to follow it further. And so he went down this path of really reading deeply into the Middle East. He got an introduction to someone that he was talking to about the Middle East, and he was asking about his family and how the cultures are so different, just like in the U.S. What part of the area you live in, if you're in the desert, you tend to have this type of culture. Like, it really changes whether you're in the coast or bordering a certain country. And he was giving him a rundown on his family, and he said, yeah, we had, back in the day, my family had a big fight, and they all, a large portion moved to closer to the Iraq area. And that went on for a while. And then they kind of made amends and started moving to this other portion. And he put together in this conversation, he's like, wait a second, did you just tell me about like the last 2,000 years of your family? And the guy said, yeah, like, wow, we know it very well. He's like, how do you know all of that? And he responded, we keep really good records.
Love it.
And it was just like similar to what Derek had, and the way he conveyed this on the podcast. I was like, wow, like, we don't go that far back. We might know who the first ancestor was across the boat, but they kept such good records. And think about how that changes your perspective of life and why you're on this planet. When you and I have talked about how our ancestry goes back to people that fought in wars, people that survived really difficult times. When you have that perspective, the small things in these unknowns that we're leaning into become much smaller. So that was a driver back to me to this conversation. Like, document it, show records, show what the journeys look like, not just the cliff notes of, born this date, died this date. It's a different perspective.
100%. Like, what's your obituary going to say? Is it, going to read, loving husband, father, again, birth date and deceased date, and not a lot, right? Like, there's no legacy left behind if you don't document it. No one's going to remember who you are. Like, how, who was the most famous person in the world 100 years ago, right? We can probably think of some historians and things like that, but you can't really tell much unless you read their autobiographies or whatever. But I think for your own family legacy, for your own personal legacy, this doesn't have to be public. You don't have to share this with anybody, but if you document it and leave it behind with your family, and they can know who great grandpa was, and read some of those letters. And, when 200 years from now, they find this podcast buried 200 feet deep into the earth, and, they figured out, like, that's cool, right? Like, that's pretty neat for each your and I's legacy of, like, sharing some of these stories, and for people to, want to listen back on how we were thinking. And for us, 40 years from now, this will always be here for us to listen back on. And I think that's pretty cool. So even if it's nothing else, write or share video or whatever and save it. One of the coolest things I saw was, especially if, for any parents out there, I don't do this. I kind of wish I did, and I could probably start now, but I just haven't. But if you have children, my cousin just had a baby, and so just brought this again top of mind. Set up an email address for that kid, and then write them an email like every month or every quarter, just like what you're thinking, like the stories that are going on at home while the kid's a baby and as they grow up, and then give them the password when they turn 18 years old. And I got a buddy who does this. He actually writes letter. He doesn't do email, but he writes letters like in his journal, and he just writes his thoughts about his kids. And it's like specifically a journal for each kid separately. And then he's going to hand them the journal when they get older, and they can read back on it. And I just thought that was the coolest way to capture and document legacy. So those are just some cool ideas that you can do. And it doesn't have to be with kids. It can be with your spouse. It can be whatever, right? It can be anybody that you want to share your thoughts with, and how you, the emotions that you had. And you just kind of immerse yourself into those moments, and it's fresh. So if you document it and write it down, share that gratitude, it's a cool way to leave that legacy years and decades to come. But I do have I want to end with a quote. And it's this guy right here, Albert Einstein, my basketball Albert Einstein. So if you're on YouTube, you can see my background here, but it's one of my most favorite quotes. And Albert says, "In all difficulty lies opportunity." And you know me with opportunity and developing awareness and finding ways to say yes to things that align and say no to everything else. Just with my past experience in the last week or so, and realizing the difficulty of that situation, that quote really hit home for me. Is like, things are tough. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure out a way to move forward. I'm trying to get back on my feet and feel normal. But I realize there's so much opportunity through this situation. And it's all based on the patience and gratitude that I was able to exude and reflect on. It doesn't have to be an opportunity to have to take action on. It was just an opportunity for me to kind of dial it back in. And so opportunity is everywhere. And it can be something you're doing tangible, an action you're taking, or it can just be a thought prompted for thought and things and how you want to move forward. And maybe just talking to someone that you know and love. But in all difficulty lies opportunity. And Albert Einstein says it best. And that's why my hooper behind me is shooting hoops, wise gentleman over there. But it just reflects on the perspective of challenges and hardships that contain the seeds of growth and discovery. And when we face difficulties, they serve as a catalyst for new ideas, solutions, and personal growth. So that's I
love it.
Where I'll end it. I think it's a pod.
Maybe you need to just take a little Sharpie and put some stitches on Einstein's head.
Yeah, let's put some railroad tracks up there. We'll put some staples.
It's great to have. I'm so glad to have you back. Glad you're healthy, scars and all. Yeah, reach out to us on what how you're diving into the unknown, what topics you want to hear, and we'll be back at you next week.